The first thing the Vethrani handlers said when they saw Bram was that she was too big. The second thing they said was that she was too slow. The third thing, and senior handler Vethrani said this one himself, standing in the loading bay with his forearms crossed and his crest plates fanned wide, was that she was unnecessary. That the Vethrani Hub Orbital Agricultural Station, Deck 2, had no protocol for a draft animal of Earth origin, no stall dimensions in the manifest, no feed allocation in the supply chain, and no operational requirement that a 13-year-old human girl had not misunderstood somewhere along the route from Earth. I had not misunderstood anything. I had the contract right there in my bag. My mother had filed it. My mother filed everything twice. I let him talk. Bram stood beside me in the loading bay and breathed. She was 22 years old and weighed somewhere just north of 900 kilograms, and she had not hurried for anyone in at least a decade. The bay's overhead lights, that flat blue-white the Vethrani used everywhere, cold as a winter morning, caught the grey in her manner and made her look older than she was. Her eyes were half closed. She had been in the transport for 11 hours and she wanted hay and she wanted to stand still, and she was doing both at once, in the order available to her. Vethrani said something else. I watched Bram's ear rotate toward him, track his voice, rotate away. She had decided he wasn't interesting. She was probably right. She's on the manifest, I said. Line 7. He looked at the manifest. He looked at Bram. His crest plates did something I didn't have a word for yet. I'd only been dealing with Vethrani for 3 weeks at that point, but it read as dismissal. He turned and walked back toward the processing wing without answering me. That was how we started. The work was straightforward. The Vethrani Hub ran agricultural intake from 6 colony worlds, sorting and logging and redistributing across the station's 12 resident species. The manifest problem, the reason my mother had secured the contract at all, was that the sorting system had developed a gap between its sensor arrays and its physical handling capacity. The bins moved on tracks. The tracks ran on elevation grades too precise for the Vethrani loader arms to calibrate in real time. Things got stuck. Things got miscounted. The Hub Stock Authority had been losing an average of 8% of their processed grain tonnage per cycle for 14 months. Bram fixed that. She moved through the sorting rows at the pace she chose, which was slow, and she did not startle at the loader arms swinging overhead, and she did not flinch when the bin track pneumatics fired off beside her ear, and she did not care about the smell of 6 alien grain species in a pressurized atmosphere, because she had grown up next to a farm that grew 3 kinds of earth grain and smelled considerably worse in August. She wore a simple harness with a coupling bar, and when a bin caught on a grade, she leaned into it, and it moved. She did this 30 or 40 times a day. The Vethrani handlers watched her the way you watch something you expect to break. She didn't break. By the end of the 2nd week, the Hub Stock Authority had logged a 4.3% reduction in tonnage loss. Vethrani had not said anything to me about this. He had said several things to me about Bram's feed allocation exceeding the listed estimate. She was working harder than anticipated and eating accordingly, and about the stall dimensions on Deck 2 not matching the original specifications, which was true, and which I had already solved by asking the maintenance crew on Deck 3 if they had a spare bulkhead panel, which they did. I was not trying to be difficult. I was trying to do the job. Bram was doing the job. I was just the one who followed her around with the manifest clipboard and made sure the numbers matched. The day it happened was a Thursday by Earth reckoning, which meant nothing on the hub but meant something to me because my father always said that Thursdays were the days things went wrong and you just had to get through them. We were in sorting row 11, the longest row, the one with the steepest grade at the far end where the secondary tracks met the primary outfeed. Bram had already moved 4 stuck bins that morning. She was working at her own pace, which is to say she was working at the pace of a glacier that had somewhere specific to be, and I was behind her with the clipboard, logging each move as she made it. Vethrani came in from the far end of the row. He had 2 of his handlers with him, junior handlers, Vethrani with lighter crest plates, the ones who usually stayed out of row 11 because the ceiling clearance made them uncomfortable. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know if it was the feed allocation again or something else. What I know is that he walked toward me along the row and I was standing slightly inside the path he wanted to walk, and instead of saying anything, he brought the flat of one of his lower arms across my shoulder and pushed me sideways. It wasn't hard. It was dismissive. The way you'd move something off a counter. I was off balance for a second, one hand out to catch myself against the bin track, and I heard Bram's hoof shift on the deck plating. I knew that sound. Easy, girl, I said softly. I had my balance back by then. My shoulder didn't hurt. I was already looking at Bram. She had turned. She was facing Vethrani and his two handlers. Her head was up. Her ears were forward. Her eyes were open all the way. What a draft horse looks like, when it is fully attending to something, is hard to describe to someone who hasn't seen it. Bram was not small. Standing in a row with her shoulders squared and her head raised, she filled the space in a way that had nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with scale and stillness. 900 kilograms of animal that had decided to pay attention. The coupling bar swung gently at her chest and was still. The two junior handlers stepped back. I didn't see what Vethrani's face did, because I was watching Bram. What happened next I am not going to describe in detail. Not because I'm not sure what happened, but because the details aren't mine to give. What I will say is that the resolution was brief, and it was handled, and when it was over, sorting row 11 was quieter than it had been when I arrived that morning. I said, "Good girl," and took hold of Bram's halter. She blew out through her nose, the long slow exhale she did when something was finished, and turned back toward the stuck bin at the far end of the row. I picked up my clipboard. We moved the bin. The hub's dock authority processed the incident report the following morning. I know this because a Vethrani administrator came down to deck 2, not Vethrani, a different one, smaller crest plates, carrying a data tablet and moving with the particular careful quality of someone who has been told to be careful. She asked me several questions about Bram's operational parameters, her behavioral history, her training record. I answered all of them. I had the documentation. My mother always sent the documentation. The administrator looked at Bram for a long time. Bram was eating hay. She did not look back. The animal was not on the station personnel manifest, the administrator said. She was on the cargo manifest, I said. Line 7. That is the error, the administrator said. She should not be on the cargo manifest. She typed something into her tablet. I waited. She has been reclassified, she said. Effective this morning. She showed me the tablet. The Deck 2 personnel manifest, which had previously listed me, Never Halt, age 13, Earth agricultural contract worker, as the sole human personnel on record, now had a second entry directly below mine. Asterisk Bram. Draft animal, Earth origin, percheron breed. Age, 22 standard Earth years. Status, specialist biological asset, class 1. Operational assignment, sorting and grade management, rows 7 through 14. Personnel designation, active. Asterisk. I read it twice. She has a personnel code, I said. Yes, the administrator said. She doesn't know what that means. No, the administrator said. She tucked the tablet under one arm. But the station does. She walked back toward the processing wing. I looked at Bram. Bram pulled another mouthful of hay from the net and chewed it slowly and stared at the middle distance with the expression she always had, which was no expression in particular, just the old calm face of an animal that had seen a great deal of weather and found most of it uninteresting. I scratched her neck just below the manet, the spot she liked, and she leaned into my hand a little. There were 3 handlers on deck 2 now instead of 7. The ones who had stayed were careful about the space around Bram, not afraid exactly, but careful, the way you're careful around something you've stopped underestimating. They learned to say her name when they came into a row she was working. She ignored them mostly, but she didn't move them, and they understood there was a difference. Vethrani was no longer on deck 2. I don't know where he went. I didn't ask. That night I wrote to my father. He had been skeptical about the contract, not about the money, which was good, but about sending me. 13 was old enough, my mother had said, and Bram would be there, and I could handle myself. My father had said yes, finally, the way he always said yes to my mother, which was to say he agreed and then worried about it separately. I told him the tonnage loss was down to 3.1%. I told him Bram had a personnel code now, which was the funniest thing I had ever typed in my life. I told him the hay supply on deck 2 was adequate, that the overhead lighting was cold but you got used to it, and that the Vethrani handlers we were working with now were polite, actually, once you got past the first few days. I did not tell him about sorting row 11. It wasn't that I was hiding it. It was that it felt like the wrong shape for a letter home. What would I have said? Bram handled it. She always does. My father knew that already. He'd known it since I was 4 years old, and the barn roof collapsed in a storm, and Bram stood over me in the wreckage for 6 hours until he found us. He'd known it the whole time. I sealed the letter and turned the light down and lay back on my bunk in the Deck 2 crew quarters, which smelled like Vethrani grain processing and a little bit like hay, and I listened to Bram moving in the stall at the end of the corridor, the slow shift of her hooves, the soft knock of her nose against the water bucket. Steady as a ship's engine. Old as the ranch. I was asleep before I knew it.